This week, we give our first impressions of the 2021 Chevrolet Tahoe, discuss the findings of our Tesla full self-driving system review, and we'll tell you the best way to get rid of that musty smell from your car's air conditioner. Next on Talking Cars. Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Mike Monticello.
And I'm Jake Fisher.
So we recently published a video and an article reviewing Tesla's full self-driving software, which claims it'll eventually make its cars capable of driving themselves. Now, luckily, we have on this podcast today Mike Monticello, who artfully wrote this article. But before we get into these Tesla findings, Jake, can you please tell us what we've been up to lately to prepare our track to test all these emerging technologies?
Right. So here's really the issue. The issue is when it comes to testing cars, if you're testing brakes or emergency handling and taking cars to the limit, we could do that on our track. We could do a really good job on our track. When it comes to some of these new advanced systems that are dealing with automatic lane changes, dealing with other traffic, recognizing that, dealing with maps and determining when to take your exit, these are things that we have been doing out on the real roads because you really need to evaluate them with other cars on the road. But here's the problem, that we're really taking all of our cars that we test to the limits, right? So we're looking for fail modes. We're trying to figure out how consistent it is. Does it have any problems? The problem here is that we can't be putting people at risk. So like, for instance, we're looking at this full self-driving software package, and some of the things it does is it will stop for traffic lights. Well, if it doesn't, we don't want to be in a situation where we're actually driving through traffic lights or going through red lights just to see how it works. So that's why we've been really looking at and moving on actually upgrading our track so that it's not just a bunch of pavement that we could go and drive the cars to the limit, but actually simulate real lanes and markings and stop signs. And we're looking at getting into traffic signals and intersections, all those. So actually on the track, we've recently actually upgraded these lines, lane markings, intersections, different things. And we're going to continue to do that so we could do a lot of this testing safely on our track rather than out on the roads.
Right. And just for those out there, just a reminder, Consumer Reports has its own track. It's a 327-acre facility out in Connecticut where we do the testing and occasionally have a little bit of fun along the way. But Mike, so listen, you did an awesome job with this article. Can you give us some insight on your story about how some of the claims from Tesla came about their full self-driving capability? I mean, what did you find?
Yeah, so what we found is that, first of all, the full self-driving capability, it's an $8,000 option, so it's quite expensive. You know, all Teslas come standard with autopilot, which includes adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assistance, which Tesla calls auto steer. But this $8,000 option, it's a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't actually make the car a full self-driving car. And what it includes auto park, auto lane change, summon, which those features have been around for a few years. It also has smart summon, navigate on autopilot, and traffic light and stop sign control. And that's the most recent feature. So we evaluated all 6 of those features. And the main thing we came away with is inconsistency of operation, to the point that these features, even though they're driver assist features, they actually require significant driver attention. And in some cases, we found that they don't really provide much in the way of real benefits to the consumers. And just a couple of quick hits. So for instance, Smart Summon. This is a feature that is supposed to almost be like your personal valet. You can have the car come to you in a parking lot. Well, we found that it works very erratically. I mean, sometimes it just stops all of a sudden, and you have to keep a really close eye on it while it's making its way toward you. And navigate on autopilot, it also worked inconsistently. Sometimes it would miss an exit that it was supposed to take. And in one case, even left us in the carpool lane with only one person in the car. Traffic light and stop sign control their most recent feature. This is an interesting feature in and of itself because it's designed by Tesla to actually stop at all traffic lights, whether they're red, yellow, or green. It goes against normal practice to start slowing down for a green light. You have to re-engage, with the shifter stalk or the gas pedal to tell the car to keep going through the green light. But we also had instances where it didn't stop for a stop sign, or other times it started stopping way before the stop sign. You'd have to keep re-engaging the system to get it to keep going forwards. So these are the kind of things we ran into. And, when you think about it like that, these features are labeled by Tesla. Some of them anyway are labeled as beta, and it's clear these features aren't quite ready for prime time.
Now, Jake, that we've been one of the real bedrocks of Consumer Reports is that we hear manufacturers' claims about products all the time, and it's really kind of one of our missions to kind of test them to see if they're living up to the hype, and we're definitely seeing that with Tesla.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. So, the system is labeled. The name of it is full self-driving. Words have meaning, and I would interpret that as it would fully self-drive. Clearly, it does not do that. There's no question it does not do that. And it's like, certainly there's a lot of, again, testing it and driving it, as Mike says, it does these things. Sometimes it works quite well, though. It's kind of interesting, as an engineer and kind of, as a fan of developing technology, you can appreciate, wow, it's starting to do these things. Sometimes it works. So it's not that it always fails. We're basically looking at, you can't depend on it, and that's really what the truth is. So I just want to make sure that it's not that it always and then not working. It's just sometimes, we can't depend on it. And at this point for $8,000, that's a lot of money to spend for a system like that. Who knows? Maybe in a couple of months, they'll keep on updating it. There's over-the-air updates. Maybe it will improve, and maybe we'll get to the point where it's worth it, but not right now.
And that's what I was going to jump in and remind our audience. Tesla is one of the companies that is continuously updating their cars. They're always beaming updates to their systems, and that's one of the reasons that we hold on to our Tesla test cars for a long time, because they are kind of under continuous development.
I expect we're going to see other car makers the same thing. We're going to have to hold on to them because they're going to have over-the-air updates, and they're going to change, and we're going to have to keep them updated.
So we reached out to Tesla for comment regarding these issues, but did not receive a reply. Take a look at Mike's story on consumerreports.org, along with the awesome video. You might even see, Jake Fisher in some of this. And I keep checking back to see what the latest is on what's happening with Tesla and autonomous and self-driving technology.
For those that don't know, CR is a nonprofit, and we're able to do all of the work we do, including anonymously buying our test cars and producing this show through memberships to our website and magazine, as well as through donations. What the Talking Cars donation program will do is allow loyal Talking Cars fans to show support for the podcast, assist in supporting the costs of producing the podcast, as well as support all the work CR does to keep consumers safe. You'll be able to contribute either as a one-time donation or on a monthly basis. Even $5 a month really helps. Go to cr.org/give-talking-cars to find out more. In any event, we'll keep delivering talking cars each and every week. Again, go to cr.org/give-talking-cars to find out more. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show.
And that brings us to our next segment of this awesome podcast, your favorite podcast and mine, and that is, what are we driving this week? The car of the week is the 2021 Chevrolet Tahoe, one of the larger SUVs out there and freshly redesigned by General Motors. The new Tahoe is nearly 7 inches longer than the last model, adding more interior space, and it gets a new independent rear suspension, which is a really intriguing upgrade for this truck. And we bought a four-wheel drive LT and added a few options like lane departure warning, big 20-inch wheels, big sunroof. It all came to about $63,650. And as is GM's tendency, when the Tahoe is redesigned, the company also puts out a new Suburban, which we also bought and will be testing. But for now, let's talk Tahoe. So, Mike, what are your first impressions of this big SUV?
Well, my first impressions are that, it has very few actual big flaws. So, I mean, in general, they did a pretty good job with this redesign. The things I really like about it, one of the first ones might be kind of obvious, which is that, I love the V8 in a world that's going to, turbocharged V6s, and of course in smaller vehicles, turbocharged 4 cylinders. It's so nice to get in and have that, it just gets off the line perfectly smooth. The engine has that great V8 burble. It has, pretty good power. This 5.3 isn't like, brimming with speed, but it has pretty good power. The transmission is pretty smooth in most of its shifts. The first 1-2 shift you do feel, but it has lots of space inside, has comfortable driving position. The cabin's quiet. There's hardly any tire or wind noise on the highway. And I love all the storage spaces throughout, especially in the center console and the front bin. Lots of places to store stuff. Infotainment system's easy to use. Most of the controls are pretty normal. It has knobs and buttons for the climate control system. Again, these are things that are going away on a lot of vehicles. So it's nice to see a brand new vehicle still keep some of these things that just really work well. But there's also some things that, aren't perfect. For instance, they now have this new pull button gear selector system. We've been seeing push button gear selectors and rotary dials, but this one you actually pull, backwards on the buttons to change, whether you're in drive or reverse. And it takes some getting used to because not that we're used to pushing buttons, but we're getting used to pushing these things. And now suddenly it's pulling, just a little awkward. Rear visibility is really tough. If you have the second row seat backs with their headrests up, you're basically blocked from the rear side window backwards because you've got the second row seat and then it's blocking the third rear window, and then you've got a huge rear pillar back there. So the rear visibility is quite tough. And also fit and finish is not fantastic. It actually looks quite nice inside and much better than say a Silverado 1500 pickup. But, we found a fair amount of misaligned panel gaps. The dash vents look cheap and don't work with any fluidity. And, it has this wood trim or fake wood trim, and it looks kind of cheap.
Jake, the GM put forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection as standard equipment on the Tahoe. That's definitely a positive move, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the price of admission right now. I mean, we expect these types of things. We expect these types of things not on a $63,000 SUV. We expect these on small cars too. I think what really stood out for me was just the sheer size of this thing. It was kind of funny when I came in and I took it for a weekend and I swapped cars and I actually brought in the Hyundai Palisade. So Hyundai Palisade,
which is not a small vehicle.
No, it is a vehicle that seats 8 people in relative comfort. It's kind of a big vehicle. So I parked it up next to the Tahoe, and you look at these two vehicles next to each other, and the Palisade looks like a small hatchback. It looks like a Volkswagen Golf compared to this thing. I mean, it is a behemoth. It is so large. And, you sit in the Palisade and you're like, it's pretty roomy. I got 8 people. I got plenty of places to put stuff. And it's like, suddenly, you get into like this huge skyscraper, and it's like, well, now I could wear my top hat or something. But I mean, it's huge. And look, it's almost like a guilty pleasure. You get in this vehicle and it's like, wow, it's so quiet and so roomy. But it's like, what is the price to pay for that? Okay, you're using more fuel, you're polluting the air more, you're parking in at the supermarket is a little bit more challenging for sure. But it's definitely, interesting. I mean, look, I folded down the rear seat in the center row, and it's like, I threw my mountain bike in, and it's kind of like, it's lost in there, and actually we just picked up our Suburban, and I haven't gotten into it yet, but it's like, as big as it is, now we got like one just slightly larger now with the Suburban. And it's like, I want to be able to see my kids.
What's funny about that, Jake, talking about how big it is that although there's plenty of room up front, when you sit in the second row, and I'm not a big guy, when my hair is, spiked up like it often is, my hair almost touches the roof in the second row. And I actually have slightly more headroom in the third row, but the third row, you wouldn't want to sit back there because it's so low to the floor that your knees are up in the air. And it's a totally flat seat, so it's not comfortable. So you'd think with all that room, they'd maybe, make it a little more comfortable for the people sitting in anything beyond the first, front two seats.
Which really gets me back to like a vehicle like the Palisade or the Kia Telluride, or even, a Subaru Ascent. You can carry around 8 people, and you're not necessarily that much more comfortable being in something that's that big. It's big, but, what exactly are you getting for all that girth?
But considering that the Tahoe is a big truck, I mean, it isn't a car-based SUV. And with that in mind, when people are looking for a vehicle of this size, this magnitude, they probably have some towing ideas in mind when it comes to buying something like this. Wouldn't you say, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. So, I mean, it's not as simple as saying, why don't you just buy a Palisades or something like that? Because this vehicle can tow a whole lot more. It could go off-roading. That is a big deal. So, I mean, look, if you don't need the towing, you don't need that kind of capability, yeah, maybe you can get something smaller. But if you do need to tow something really big, yeah, this is what these things are made for.
Yeah, it's a tough truck. I mean, that's what it's based on,
Well, I really don't have much more to add. You guys covered all the bases, and Mike, I'm just glad you mentioned the V8 rumble, because that certainly stood out for me as when I had a chance to drive it. And we'll have more on the Tahoe as soon as we're done testing. Check back with consumerreports.org for more updates. And that brings us to was arguably the most entertaining part of this podcast, and this is taking your questions. We love getting them. Text, video questions, keep them coming. TalkingCars@iCloud.com. That's TalkingCars@iCloud.com. First up is a video question. This is John from Richland, Washington.
I'm a long-time listener, been with the podcast since the first episode, and I really love the show. Also appreciate that you've continued to put the podcast out even during the pandemic. Thank you very much. So my question this week concerns this 2020 V90 cross country that I just purchased. It will replace this 2006 V70R, which now becomes my weekend driver. So my question is, what's the recommended break-in procedure for new cars these days? I looked in the manual in the glove box and the more extensive one online. I even called the dealer, and there's nothing about it. So what's the deal?
So, Mike Monticello, you actually reached out to Volvo to get an answer. What do you got?
I did. So I reached out to them, and what they told me was, with the Drive-E introduction, which is the Drive-E is what they called their 4-cylinder engines that they came out with for the 2015 and a half model year. That was a turbocharged 4-cylinder or a 4-cylinder that was both turbocharged and supercharged. They said with the Drive-E introduction, there is no prescribed or necessary break-in procedure. The powertrain continuously adapts to the driver's style, so a break-in is not really necessary. But, if you talk to, mechanics like John Ibbotson, our chief mechanic at CR, he'll tell you basically the main thing to do with a car, any car, is just don't drive the car really hard for that first 1,000 miles or so. Don't tow with it. Don't do a lot of hard braking early on. And it's funny because our 2019 Mazda 3, the test car that I'm currently driving right now, says kind of something similar. They say they actually have a break-in section for the manual, but then it says there's no special break-in necessary. They said there's just a few precautions, kind of like what we just said. Don't race the engine. Don't maintain one constant speed, either slow or fast for a long period of time. Do not drive constantly at full throttle or high engine RPM for extended periods. Avoid unnecessary hard stops and avoid full throttle starts. So, that's basically, be reasonably kind to your vehicle, but also don't baby it and don't beat on it. So somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the point about constant speed. When we were talking about an answer to this question, that's the one thing that I was always told when I was younger is if you have cruise control in your car, don't just buy it brand new and then stick it at one speed for days and weeks at a time. Other than that, it all kind of jives together. All right, Jake, you got anything else to add?
Well, I think what we're seeing is, there's a lot of things that we used to do with cars, and cars are a lot better now. And, it used to be the braking procedure was really important. It used to be you had to change the oil every 3,000 miles. It used to be you had to adjust the points and, change all these things. Look, they've been developed. They're a lot more robust, and it's maybe something you don't have to worry about so much anymore.
Oh, that's a great point. When people say, oh, they don't make them like they used to. And we say, thank goodness they don't make them like they used to. Okay, great video question. Loved it. Next up is Nick from Lyme, Connecticut, basically in our backyard. Nick writes, I have a 2013 Volkswagen Jetta Hybrid. I recently contacted VW of America to ask what my PZEV, or partial zero emissions vehicle warranty, covered, and was told in an email that they were not allowed to disclose this information. How can this be? How can I have a warranty and not know what's covered? And Mike, once again, you're our intrepid reporter, and you contacted Volkswagen. What did they tell you?
Yeah, so they said for the state of California and for states that follow California emission regulations and requirements, the emissions parts warranty for PZEV vehicles is longer than the normal 50-state warranty and is on top of the new car limited warranty. So you've got your defects and performance warranty, that's 3 years, 50,000 miles. But then you start getting into the PZEV stuff. High cost emissions related parts warranty is 7 years or 70,000 miles. And by the way, they said that this is listed in the owner's manual reference CCR 2037. Defects and performance warranty for PZEV is 15 years or 150,000 miles. Battery and other storage device, 10 years, 150,000 miles. And the extended federal emissions warranty coverage is 8 years or 80,000 miles, and that covers 3 specific major emissions control components: the catalytic converters, the electronic emissions control unit, or the ECU, and the onboard emissions diagnostic device or computer, the OBD.
So we've learned 2 things here. I was going to be clear about things. One thing we learned is if someone says we can't tell you, probably you just need to ask someone else. 2 is we're setting this really dangerous precedent that people aren't going to contact the manufacturers. They're going to contact us because, it seems like we could find this information. So thanks, Mike, for finding all that. But it's very easy to get a dead end when you're contacting somebody. That's unfortunate.
I think your point being they should make this a lot more readily available to their owners is what you're saying, right, Jake?
Sure. I mean, this idea that, we can't tell you what the warranty is, it's ridiculous. Why would they say that?
And of course, I was thinking, as Mike was rattling off all these, definitions and numbers, I'm like, I hope this isn't going to be on the quiz.
Quiz at 11.
Great question. Finally, we've got a question from Rob from Taylorsville, Utah. Rob writes, I've been working at home since early February and driving less than 100 miles a month. Recently, I've noticed the air conditioner in my car has a musty smell. I've changed the cabin air filter and it hasn't made a difference. Suggestions? Well, Rob, you should know that Jake Fisher is our resident climate expert, as the insiders like to say, HVAC. He has done this in his previous life before Consumer Reports. So, Jake, what can you tell Rob?
What I can tell Rob is you're not alone. This is something that happens. So what you're probably smelling is there's condensation that comes from the evaporator inside your HVAC module. Yeah, I'm going to get all techie here. But I mean, basically just there's water that collects. And you've probably seen that water kind of spilling out in the bottom of your car on a hot, humid day. But sometimes some of it collects in there, and if it sits in there for a while, sometimes it grows stuff. You get some bacteria and stuff in there. And actually, sometimes there's a little tube at the bottom. Sometimes it will get plugged up and holds that water. So I think what you have is you got stuff growing in there. Fortunately, it's actually a pretty easy fix. And here's what you want to do. You put the fan on, open up your windows, and you get something like a Lysol or some kind of antibacterial spray, and you spray it in what's called the plenum. And the plenum is actually, so where your wipers are and the base of your windshield, there's kind of those vents there. That's called the plenum. And what that is that's where the air goes in to your HVAC system, your heating and cooling system. So you sit there and you just basically unload the can into that. The system will load it in, put it on like a low fan speed. It will bring that in. It'll hit that water. It'll hit all that stuff and it'll kill it. And hopefully that will help your situation.
I mean, this kind of drives home the point that cars are meant to be driven. I mean, a car that's parked for an extended period of time, you risk your battery going down, your tires getting flat spots, rubber components such as belts and wipers can dry out, and we have a number of articles on consumerreports.org that talks about what to do with your car if it's been sitting for a while. And Mike Monticello, do you have anything more to tell Rob?
Why would I mess with perfection? Jake covered it perfectly.
Cars are like people. You sit too long and it's not good for you.
Right.
Go out and exercise.
Couch potatoes and couch cars. Well, anyway, instead of talking potatoes, we're talking cars. That's going to do it for this episode. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and the topics that we discussed. And please keep reaching out to us with more questions. talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.